Thank you, Mr. Schindler. Anyone else present for this? Okay. We have before us a proposed stipulation between the commission advocate and the respondent. The commission may vote to approve or reject the stipulation. This is not a pre-probable cause stipulation, so if the stipulation is rejected, the matter will be heard at the Division of Administrative Hearings, or the parties can attempt to arrive at a new stipulation. Complainants have the right to comment in writing on proposed stipulations. We have not received any such comment. The advocate will present the stipulation.
Thank you, commissioners. The respondent is a former candidate for fire commissioner and a former the Board of Commissioners for the Fort Myers Beach Fire Control District. He filed an inaccurate 2017 CE Form 1 Statement of Financial Interests. He has entered into a stipulation with the advocate whereby he admitted the violations as set forth in the report of investigation. He did file an amended CE Form 1 on December the 28th, 2018, when he was informed that his original form was inaccurate. He has agreed to pay a civil penalty of $500, and he is currently not holding any public position or public employment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Are there questions from the commissioners? Seeing no question from the commissioners, Mr. Schindler, would you like to comment on the stipulation?
This is Schindler, and yeah, you know, I held the position for 2 consecutive terms, lost re-election on this last one, where this complaint was filed. I filled out the forms exactly the same way. I realize that may be irrelevant, but I filled out the forms for all 3 different times the same way, and nothing was done to defraud. And I submitted the amended form, as you mentioned, which corrected everything, and there were no conflicts of interest, which was the original thought from the complainant, the person that complained. I find it really strange that failing to check one little block, I realize that when I go look back at it, it says you have to check it, but having done it for 3 times in a row, you know, for previous 4-year terms, and had done it the same way, I made a very bad assumption that I was filling out the forms right. And no harm, no foul in my feelings. You know, I don't even, but I realize there's precedent that is saying that if you don't fill that block in, you're subject to a fine. And so I guess I have to accept that, but I'm very unhappy about it. Wasted a lot of time, of your time and my time, and nothing has come of this other than the potential $500 fine. That completes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Schindler. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Schindler? May I have a motion regarding the stipulation?
Dr. Brady.
McManus moves.
Okay.
Commissioner McManus moves to approve.
Yes.
And a second?
Second, Willie Meggs, second.
Okay.
Commissioner Meggs for second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Commissioner Brady?
No.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Thank you. The stipulation is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Schindler, for participating in this call and in the process.
All right, and so you'll send me a bill, is that right?
I'll be in touch with you, Mr. Schindler.
All right,
Miller.
all right. That's all for Schindler. Thank you.
Thank you. Now go to item 5B, which is complaint number 18164, Enright Dana Johnson. Is Ms. Johnson on the call?
Yes, good morning. This is Attorney Ray Curtis, attorney for Dana Johnson. Ms. Johnson apparently used my link to log in, and she shows up on your screen also as Ray Curtis. And she doesn't realize that she's muted right now, but if she can hear me, maybe she can click unmute. But she is present.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Curtis.
I'm here.
Is the
Thank you.
complainant present on the call?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
All right, that's Ms. Johnson. Is the complainant, Mikkel Johnson, on the phone? All right, thank you. We have before us a proposed stipulation between the commission advocate and the respondent. The commission may vote to approve or to reject the stipulation. This is not a probable cause stipulation, so if the stipulation is rejected, the matter will be heard at the Division of Administrative Hearings, or the parties can attempt to arrive at a new stipulation. Complainants have the right to comment in writing on the proposed stipulation. We do not have anything on this one, correct, Ms. Miller?
This is Chris Anderson, Chair. We do have a response from the complainant on this matter to the proposed stipulation.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have Ms. Miller present the stipulation.
Thank you, Commissioners. Elizabeth Miller on behalf of the Commission. The respondent has entered into a joint stipulation, and you have before you for your consideration that stipulation. The respondent has served as the Dixie County Clerk of Court and Comptroller since November 2016. She admitted that she used the clerk's office equipment and materials to produce church bulletins, and she subsequently fabricated and altered receipts, which was information that was contained in the records of the clerk's office. She altered those receipts to appear as though she had contemporaneously repaid the clerk's office for the supplies and the equipment that she used to print the church bulletins. Respondent has agreed to resign from her public position effective today and receive a public censure and reprimand. The parties would ask that you adopt the stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Miller? Seeing none, the respondent may wish to comment on the stipulation. All right, Mr. Curtis, are you interested?
Yes,
in
thank
responding?
you. The only comment would be that we would hope that the commission would accept the joint stipulation and recommended order. And as you'll see, attached to that was a draft letter prepared, a resignation letter. There has already been roughly a month ago, a resignation notice sent to the governor's office and also to the chief judge of the circuit, and the chief judge has made an appointment for a replacement or an interim replacement clerk of court. And so we're hopeful, especially because there are quite a few moving parts, that you will accept the stipulation and recommended order.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Curtis or Ms. Johnson? Seeing none, may I have a motion on the stipulation?
Move to approve the stipulation as presented. Dan Brady.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Brady. A second by Mr. Gilzine.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the stipulation and Ray Dana Johnson signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The stipulation is approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Curtis and Ms. Johnson, for being present on the call. And Ms. Miller will contact you later to discuss further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
you.
And I will send a copy of the resignation letter that is going to be sent right now to the governor's office. I will copy Ms. Miller on that so that she can record that with a file.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
Thank you.
Next, we go to item 5C, In re Ryan Bolston, complaint number 19-09. I know Mr. Heron is present. I see him on the screen. Is there anyone else present, complainant or respondent for this matter? We have before us a proposed stipulation between the commission advocate and the respondent. The commission may vote to approve or to reject the stipulation. This is not a pre-probable cause stipulation. If the stipulation is rejected, the matter will be heard at the Division of Administrative Hearings, or the parties can attempt to arrive at a new stipulation. Complainants have the right to comment in writing on the proposed stipulation, and there is no written stipulation from the complainant in this matter that I see. Please correct me if I'm mistaken. Thank you. The advocate will present the stipulation.
Melody
Ms.
Hadley. Melody Hadley, Commission Advocate. Respondent serves as a Delray Beach City Commissioner and was a former member of the Community Redevelopment Board. This is a case where respondent violated sections 112.313 sub 3 and 112.313 sub 7 Florida statutes through his ownership of an entity that was doing business with his agency. In the stipulation, respondent admits that he violated the ethics law and agrees to the entry of a final order recommending a civil penalty of $2,000. I respectfully ask for the Commission's approval of the joint stipulation.
Thank you, Ms. Hadley. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Hadley? Mr. Herron, do you wish to comment on the stipulation?
Only briefly, Madam Chair. We would ask that the commission approve the stipulation, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Herron?
Madam Chair, Carvajal.
Mr. Carvajal.
As I remember the situation, the person was still in a position where future conflicts would potentially arise. With this, obviously, he's aware of future voting issues. Is that right, Mr. Herron?
Yes, Commissioner, and these allegations arose with respect to his service on a downtown development authority. He's now on the city commission, but he's on a different agency now. But again, he's aware of it, and it's not going to happen again.
Anything further, Mr. Carvajal?
Madam Chair, thank you. No.
Any other questions from any other commissioners? Seeing none, I'd ask for a vote on the motion on the stipulation.
Commissioner Carvajal moves the motion.
Thank you. Have a second? I have a motion by Commissioner Carvajal. I'm going to take the second from Commissioner Meggs. Is there any discussion on the stipulation? Seeing none, I'd call for a vote. All in favor of adoption of the stipulation in complaint number 1909, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The stipulation is approved. Thank you, Mr. Herron.
Thank you.
Next, we go to item 5D, complaint number 19-164, in re Peter Antonacci.
Madam Chairman, can I have a second, please?
Yes, sir.
As some of you may know, Pete Antonacci is a childhood friend of mine. We went to high school and college together and maintained a cordial relationship even as of today. I will be recusing myself from any discussion or voting on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brady. Will the parties, the complainant and their counsel, please identify themselves?
Melody Hadley, Commission Advocate.
Thank you, Ms. Hadley. We have before us a proposed pre-probable cause stipulation between the commission advocate and the respondent. After considering all the materials and the presentation of the parties, the commission may vote to approve or reject the stipulation. As this is a pre-probable cause stipulation, if the stipulation is rejected, the probable cause determination will take place at a future meeting of the commission. Complainants have the right to comment in writing on proposed stipulations. We have not received any comments. Ms. Hadley, please present the stipulation.
At this time, I bring before you a pre-probable cause stipulation. Respondents' 2018 CE Form 6 included inaccuracies regarding assets, liability, and income. Subsequent to the filing of the complaint, respondent filed 2 CE Form 6Xs, which disclosed the missing information. We ask the commission to accept respondent stipulation that he violated Article 2, Section 8 Florida Constitution and Section 112.3144 Florida statutes and impose a civil penalty of $1,750.
Thank you, Ms. Hadley. Are there questions from the commissioners? And the respondent is not present. Can I have a motion?
This is Willie Meggs. Can I make a comment also before the motion?
Certainly.
I have known Pete Antonacci since he got out of law school, I think in 1977. Yeah. And we worked together as assistant state attorneys, and I knew him as statewide prosecutor. I've known him for well over 40 years. I don't know if we have enough folks. It sounds like he's agreed to this stipulation, so I will vote for it. But I did want to disclose my relationship with Pete.
Thank you, Commissioner Meggs. May I have a motion on the stipulation?
Carvajal moves the motion.
Second, Grant.
Thank you. A motion by Commissioner Carvajal, second by Commissioner Grant. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to adopt the stipulation in complaint number 19-164, please signify by saying aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Signify by saying nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. We're now moving on to item 6A, consideration of dismissal. Is the respondent or complainant present?
Mark Heron on behalf of Stephanie Kraft.
Aaron, Ms. Kraft present?
She is not.
Is the complainant present? The advocate for this matter is Ms. Miller.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you please present the proposal for dismissal?
Yes, thank you. I'm Elizabeth Miller, advocate for the commission. Commissioners, I'd like to point out first on page, paragraph 11 of the dismissal, the year should read 2020 rather than 2010. That was an error on my part, and I apologize for that. Commissioners, this is a case arising out of facts that occurred around 2007 when the respondent was a member of the Broward County School Board. She was also a member of the Florida Bar. She allegedly helped developers obtain a $500,000 reduction on the impact fees that the developers had to pay the school district when they were designing and developing and building a housing project. In return, the respondent and her husband allegedly accepted $10,000 from the developers. On October 10th, 2010, respondent was criminally charged with bribery, unlawful compensation, conspiracy to commit unlawful compensation, and official misconduct. The governor then suspended her from her public office. There was a jury trial. The respondent was found guilty of official misconduct, which is a third-degree felony. After the trial and when the verdict was read, she was remanded to the custody of the sheriff. She stayed in jail for 9 days awaiting sentencing. At the sentencing, 9 days later, the trial judge withheld adjudication and sentenced the respondent to 5 years reporting probation, 20 hours of community service, and imposed court costs and fines. The respondent's probation was stayed pending an appeal. The appeal was unsuccessful. On April 17th, 2015, the respondent was suspended from practice of law by the Florida Bar due to being convicted of a felony. Pursuant to the statute, the advocate respectfully requests that the public interest would not be further served by proceeding with the case, and thereby request that the case be dismissed. The facts of the case are identical to the facts underpinning the criminal case. in addition to those facts, several witnesses have died, and the respondent has served a stint in jail. She was removed from her public position, and she cannot practice law until she meets certain criteria that the Florida Bar has set forth. I don't believe any further action would be necessitated by these particular circumstances or serve the public good. Therefore, I respectfully request that the case be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Are there any questions for Ms. Miller?
This is Dr. Brady. Is there any reason that it took so long after the denial of the appeal for us to actually bring it back to us for dismissal? Or is that just how long these things take?
There, if I may, through the chair, after the denial of the appeal, there was another appeal, ineffective assistance of counsel, that was went forward. And I don't know what happened with that. We decided to proceed with the case. Enough time had passed. We decided to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Miller?
Madam Chair Carvajal.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if this is for the advocate or for the staff, but because the proposal is to dismiss based on Rudd amendment, are we properly stating all the reasons as the law specifies that we fully explain?
Miller? Or Mr. Anderson?
Through the chair, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Carvajal, I believe that there is adequate written and oral statements by the advocate to support the rationale for dismissing the matter under the Rudd amendment. I believe it is adequate.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Miller or Mr. Anderson? Hearing none, Mr. Herron?
Yes, Madam Chair. Again, we'd urge the commission to adopt the recommendation of the advocate here to dismiss under the Rudd rule. I would point out a couple of things that are referenced in the motion and or may not be referenced in the motion as well. 5 years of the delay in this case was attributed to the state attorney, who asked the commission not to go forward for a period of 5 years while they were continuing to investigate this matter. As you know, we had requested continuances. It's in the file that you have before you, but those continuances were relating to the trial and the appeal. Again, I think Ms. Miller has explained that Ms. Kraft has suffered significant consequences. I would point out in paragraph 7, where it says 20 hours of volunteer community services per week that she had to do during this probation period, not just 20 hours of community service, which my ears heard when Ms. Miller was explaining the context of this motion. So again, we'd ask that you adopt the motion to dismiss under the Rudd rule, and I'm here to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. Are there questions for Mr. Herron from the commissioners? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion.
Move to adopt the recommendation of the advocate.
That's motion by Commissioner Brady. Who was the second?
Commissioner Grant.
Grant. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair Carvajal.
Yes, sir.
I particularly just want to highlight for the discussion at the moment, item 17 in the order to dismiss, that this doesn't set a precedent. Obviously, Rudd doesn't. In any case, we have our choices, but wanted to make sure that criminal proceedings in general will not always lead to dismissals.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote on the motion by Commissioner Brady, second by Commissioner Grant, and raise Stephanie Kraft for the dismissal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Herron, for appearing.
Thank you.
Next, we have 6B, complaint number 19-155, Honorary John Kinsey. This is a statutorily generated financial disclosure matter. Will Ms. Miller please present?
Thank you. Elizabeth Miller, advocate for the commission. The respondent was serving as a member of two boards, the Board of Supervision for the Twin Creeks North Community Development District and the Board of Supervisors for Creekside at Twin Creeks Community Development District. The commission found probable cause that the respondent failed or refused willfully to file his 2017 CE Form 1. On February 28th, respondent tendered his resignation from both boards. The resignations were accepted on February 28th, 2020 by both boards. Because the holding of public office is necessary to invoke and maintain the jurisdiction of the commission no longer possesses jurisdiction in this matter, and I would respectfully request that the complaint be dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Are there questions of the commissioners for Ms. Miller?
Dr. Brady, just to make sure I understand, was a fine attributed to him for having not filed his disclosure on time?
Through the chair. I'm not sure I understood you, sir. You said, is there a fine? Yes, there would be a fine, and that would not be dismissed or waived. He would still have to pay the fine.
But because he is no longer a public officer, we have no jurisdiction. He needs to pay the fine, and that's the end of it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Ms. Miller? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion.
So moved.
That was Commissioner Berger.
Yes.
Second,
Second by?
Commissioner Grant.
Second by Commissioner Grant. Is there any discussion on the motion for dismissal? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to dismiss in Mr. Kinsey's case, 19-155, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we move on to 6C, complaint number 19-195, Henri Lawrence Malagna. This is a self-generated
It's Chris Anderson. I can't hear the chair anymore.
Okay.
Give us just a minute. I'm sure Lynn's following up on that right now.
Commissioner Brady, as Vice Chair, would you accept a motion for personal privilege here?
Yes, I will.
I would just like to highlight how well the staff has adapted to all of the changes that we have done with the teleconference last time and Zoom. But I really want to highlight how well the commissioners did to figure all this stuff out on their own. We usually get considerable help on all of our computers and stuff. So I think it should just be noted.
Thank you.
Above and beyond.
Thank you for those comments, and let me extend my appreciation to everyone for having taken the time and the diligence to use this process, which is rarely easy.
This is Kim Rosenka. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
I apologize. Commissioner Brady, did you take over?
only for a second.
Okay. Where are we now?
We're where we were when you left.
Oh, okay. All right. This is a statutorily generated financial disclosure matter. Ms. Miller, would you present the stipulation, please?
Yes, ma'am. Elizabeth Miller, advocate for the commission. The respondent was serving as a member of the Planning and Zoning Board for the town of Lake Park. He willfully failed or refused to file his 2017 CE Form 1 Statement of Financial Interests. On March 2nd, 2020, respondent resigned from the Planning and Zoning Board. Because the holding of office is necessary to invoke and maintain the commission's jurisdiction, the commission no longer possesses jurisdiction in this matter, and I respectfully request that the commission dismiss the complaint. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Do we have any questions for Ms. Miller? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
So moved.
That was Commissioner Berger?
Yes.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Willie Meggs.
By Mr. Meggs. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of dismissal of complaint number 19-195, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed,
Aye.
signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're on item 7A, consideration of final order rescinding financial disclosure fine, FD 17-144, and Ray Williams Strawbridge. Do I hear a motion to adopt the staff draft order, or do we need to hear from Ms. Clanky?
So moved. Commissioner Berger.
Thank you, Commissioner Berger. May I have a second?
Second, Carvajal.
Second by Mr. Carvajal. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, final order rescinding financial disclosure fine and FD 17-144, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have item 8, consideration of financial disclosure appeals. There's no appeal in which the appellant had asked to be heard. Are there any of these items 1 through 49 that any commissioner wishes to take off the list to discuss individually?
I just like to make a comment. This is Dr. Brady. I went through and looked at all 49 of these. I think there was only one where we did not waive the fine. And I guess I get somewhat concerned about the fact that in 48 of the cases, it was clear, or fairly clear, there was just a communication difficulty, that these guys moved, changed addresses, did something, and never got the notices. And I think that's something collectively everybody should try to work on to try to get that part of the process a little cleaner.
Thank you, Commissioner Brady. Is there any of these that anyone wishes to take up individually? If not, I'd ask for a motion en masse to approve these orders.
I move the, be approved and bank.
Second,
Is that,
McManus.
is that Commissioner Grant first?
Yes. Yes.
Motion by Commissioner Grant, second by Commissioner McManus. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, all are approved. Next, have item 9, consideration of second order on request for extension. There are 3 of these. Would any member like an explanation of one or more of these, or do I hear a motion to adopt staff's recommendation of them en masse?
Move to
Carvajal,
adopt.
second your motion.
I saw Commissioner Carvajal's box light up, so I'm going to take him as the motion. Who's the second?
I'll second it, Dr. Brady.
Okay, Dr. Brady?
Mhm.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of these orders on request for extension, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. These extensions are granted. Thank you. Next, we have item 10, consideration of expenditure. Our Executive Director, Mr. Anderson, will present this item.
Thank you, Chair Rozanka. I have a brief memo in the materials, members, that you've seen. Every year we renew the contract with the Attorney General's office for our wonderful advocates and their wonderful support person. They do a fantastic job, but because it costs more than $10,000, I have to get approval, or the director does, whoever that might be each year. And that's what we're asking for. The figure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Miller, is exactly the same figure as it was last year for their representation as advocates. And of course, the reason we have to do that is commission staff attorneys cannot advise both the court in effect and be the prosecutor. So we have to have, in effect, 2 different law firms performing 2 different functions. But I would ask your approval for that figure that's in the memo, which is the same figure as last year, which is 376,830.
May I have a motion, please?
Move to authorize the expenditure.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Brady. Was that second by Commissioner Gilzine?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes, could we,
Yes.
Dr. Brady?
I was going to just comment that I assume at some point in time, the advocates are evaluated by either us or their employer, and we should communicate in the renewal of the agreement to use them our continued satisfaction, exemplary satisfaction with the work they're doing.
Mr. Anderson, do you have a comment?
Through the chair, I'll be happy to do that in some manner. I've talked to their supervisor, and he's well aware, of our pleasure with their service. But I'll be happy to do a memo or something, yes, sir, to memorialize that. Thank you. It's a good suggestion.
Mrs. Shields, McManus. Hello?
Commissioner McManus? Yes.
Yes, well, I would join in that, but I also want to ask a question. Is there any requirement to, I assume there's not, to have bids on this? Any requirements like that?
Mr. Anderson?
Through the chair, excuse me, not that I'm aware of, and I would ask Ms. Stillman, you're heavy on budgetary matters. You're not aware of any such requirement either, are you?
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Gilzine?
Can I get an example of litigation expenses?
Mr. Anderson or Ms. Stillman?
Through the chair, Mr. Anderson, what those would be, Commissioner, among other things, would be like when they have to pay to serve subpoenas on witnesses, or if they have to pay for a court reporter for the hearing, those types of things that are similar to regular court actions.
Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. Anderson?
Yes, I have a question. Does this, this is Willie Meggs, does this, do we have any involvement in incentive pay, like a increase in salary for these folks? Is that figured in that 376,000?
Mr. Anderson or Ms. Dillon?
Through the chair, and Ms. Miller might be able to answer this better, but my understanding is that we appropriate, and then how they handle the compensation within their office is a matter for their supervisor and their office to allocate funds as they see fit there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
One last question, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
As it relates to, because Director Anderson, you said this is the same line item from last year, same budgeted amount. Has the caseloads gone up or down year over year?
Mr. Anderson?
Through the chair, the cases are, different obviously each year in terms of number, Commissioner. Although a big part of how the advocates operate, as with any law firm, is that a lot of it is sort of just riding herd on everything that they have going. And that really takes, never a 40-hour week, probably more like an 80-hour week, regardless really of the number of cases. And cases can differ in complexity. I think years ago when the commission first began, they only had one advocate, and that went for, I think, about 10 years or so. And then they definitely had to have two, and they're always very busy. And I don't know exactly their internal mechanism. Ms. Miller or Ms. Hadley might want to elaborate on this. I don't know if they fill out like 15-minute time slips like some private law firms used to do, or if they just get it done without wasting a lot of time doing 15-minute slips. But I know that they definitely do get it done, and they have a lot of responsibility. And they do everything you see them do here, plus they do a lot of things outside of your view, such as being co-counsel on appeals, like we have one going right now where Mr. Zilkowski and Ms. Hadley are working on that. But in terms of the amount of money, I think we're getting a great deal, and in the future it might have to go up a little bit, because of more cost or inflation. But I think it is maybe if anybody's eating anything, it's their office this year, and we might possibly could expect some increase next year. I'm not sure about that, but if the advocates would like to speak to you on that, I would invite them to if they feel like they'd like to.
Yeah, and that goes to the point of why. Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just wanted to piggyback off of that. It goes to the point that if the volume is increasing, when does it get to the point where the commission has to increase the dollar amount to compensate for the work? So that's the reason why I was asking.
If I might, through the chair, just offer that in all the years that I've been working on budget and dealing with this contract, each and every year we've gotten back a credit for the unused amount in the contract.
Gotcha.
So it's paid out on a quarterly basis, and we usually see that refund around the second quarter. So we've not, since I've been doing this at least 7 or 8 years, not used the entire amount of contract and often have it returned to us. The Attorney General's office lets us know each year what they anticipate the contract amount to be for, and I write that into the budget.
Ms. Miller or Ms. Hadley, would you like to comment? You don't have to.
Ms. Hadley, would you like to comment? I would like to. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that in response to a question by a commissioner, I think it was McManus, the legislature requires the Attorney General's office to prosecute their cases, so the commission's cases. So there would not be an option at this point, because of the way the law is written, to go to an outside firm. And we have seen an increase in cases due to the effectiveness of the willful law, because the recommended penalty is so severe, that is possible loss of position or public employment. Those cases, those respondents generally want a hearing. And we probably will come back next year and ask for a slight increase in the budget due to costs for process servers rising and costs of travel going up. But right now, we're okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Questions?
Sadly, would you like to comment? Okay, she's good. Any other questions of Mr. Anderson regarding this expenditure?
Just one last question. So when do we actually, thank you, Madam Chair. When do we actually submit our LBRs? Like what time period is that usually done? Legislative budget requests.
If I might through the chair, it depends on which month session begins. I anticipate that since the session will be in March of 2021, I imagine I'll start seeing requests for budget information around December, possibly.
Thank you, Ms. Tillman. Any other questions regarding this expenditure? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
Dr. Brady, move to approve.
Second, Mr. Grant.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Brady, second by Mr. Grant. Is there any further discussion amongst the commissioners? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right. We now go on to reports. I would just like to thank everyone for this experiment by Zoom. I think it's been working out so far, except for my disconnection earlier. And hopefully we will get to see each other in July. I've looked at it's going to be a very large agenda. I looked through the pending cases, so just preparing you in advance. I also want to thank the staff because they have worked very hard to make this happen. This Zoom meeting, I had hoped to have a meeting in Tallahassee in June. It just wasn't possible. There weren't any buildings that could accommodate us. So I appreciate everyone's help with this meeting. Mr. Anderson, do you have a report?
Are you saying that the July meeting will be in Tallahassee or a Zoom?
I was hoping to be in Tallahassee. Now that we can have 50 people in a room, I'm hoping we can do it.
Where,
Mr. Anderson? Sorry, Commissioner Brady? Your block set up.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
McManus? Yes, sir.
what room would we be in?
The staff of Mr. Anderson may have it. We probably will not be at the first DCA. We'll probably be someplace else, and I know Mr. Anderson is looking into that.
Because we're practically elbow to elbow and over there at that state office.
Yes, sir. And I do not believe the first DCA will allow us in there in July, but that's speculation on my part unless they have a different room. Mr. Anderson, your report?
Thank you, Chair. Just to elaborate on that, we are working hard to get a workable physical location for an actual meeting in July where there will be a bigger dais so that members can be separated more and a big enough room altogether. And we've had some success. Ms. Stillman and others have been working on that. And we've had some good feedback for a possible location. And we'll be letting you know the details on that. It's not going to be the first DCA that we're looking at. It's a different place. It's downtown. So it looks like we'll be able to get that is big enough. And we do have some things that we do need to take care of in an actual physical meeting that aren't on this agenda because they're just not amenable to this sort of format. But that's looking good, though, Commissioners, for adequate social distancing and a good place to meet in actuality in July. And a couple of other things I'd like to mention that Travis Wade, who was an investigator with us for 19 years, he got picked off from us by a municipality, and he's now a city manager and doing a fine job, and we were sorry to lose him. You know, it's a good opportunity for him and a good grab for the people that now have his services, but we're sure going to miss him. And y'all, of course, remember Travis. He, like I say, been around for 19 years investigating cases. Very well done. And then also we are fortunate enough to join our staff recently, Kathy Steverson, who is my new assistant, who is doing a wonderful job. She has a background in the private sector in finance and investments. Very good here, considering our financial disclosure idiosyncrasies and nuances. And also she has some time spent with the Department of Corrections, which is also very advantageous to us, considering the amount of correspondence we get from folks that have been legitimately deprived of their liberty. So that I don't have anything further. And Willie, that was legitimately deprived, not illegitimately deprived. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Anderson? Mr. Anderson?
I wanted to make a quick comment. I wanted to echo what's been said by the chair and several others. I'm sure that a great deal of time and effort has been put into this, and from my vantage point, it's very efficient. I would prefer to see everyone face to face and hear everyone face to face. Certainly we're getting a peek into everyone's living room or their offices. But I'm glad that everyone is healthy and safe, and looking forward to working with everyone face to face. But thank you all for all your efforts, because this has gone very smoothly.
Hear, hear.
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair.
Commissioner Berger.
Madam
Seeing
Chair
nothing
Caldwell.
left on the session agenda,
Madam Chair.
we're going to adjourn. I'm going to try to fix this situation with my computer.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Apologies. Just a question, and it may be for either the director or Ms. Stillman. For those of us whose term expire after this meeting, how do we get notified whether we come back for the next meeting or not? So,
If I might, through the chair, this is Mr. Anderson. Commissioner, when you're not replaced, then you hold over, so you're still legitimately in office. Of course, we have a relatively new governor, and they've got a lot going on and everything, and I don't know if they're going to be actively, replacing anybody to that end. I haven't heard anything for sure. So if we discover that you have been replaced, or if you get a letter directly that we don't know about saying you have been replaced, then please let us know. But we'll be in touch there. At this point, we're not actively talking to the governor's office about anything, in view of everything else they're dealing with. But the technicality is that you're all legit until you're replaced by somebody else, even if you're holding over. And as we know things, we'll let you know. And if any of you individually have some strong feelings on serving further, or maybe wanting some affirmative contact with the governor's office, if you let me know individually on that. But the short of it is that you're all legit until otherwise notified.
Director, this is Tony. I'm actually a speaker's appointee.
Right, and I'm thinking, also Speaker and Senate President, we haven't really heard anything from them either.
Thank you.
How much time do we need before the next meeting? Before the executive session? Mr. Anderson, Ms. Stillman?
I think I'd ask Ms. Blaze on that, maybe, if she's listening.
We can join right in.
Oh,
I'm going to
What
give
would
us
you
5
say?
minutes
Yeah.
so I can try to fix my situation here. So at 10:05, I will try to convene the meeting.
Do we have different login codes?
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
second address that was in the,
So we all have to log out.
we have to leave the meeting and then come back with this, and it's actually 2 separate emails, which took me about 40 minutes to find this point.
Thank you.
Are we adjourned?
Is that a motion, Dr. Brady?
So moved.
Second by?
Willie Meg, second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned. All. See you soon.